a sort of contrapuntal relationship to Confucianism. Confucianism is the philosophy of social order, and it is a very literary kind of attitude to life. Confucianism centers around the idea that sanity is grounded in words, numbers, and ritual. You might say Confucianism is a social ritual rather than a religion. It's based on the idea that you've got to find the right names for things, and it's terribly important to name things properly. Exactness of language is critical. And so also music has to be just right. So Confucianism makes for a very high order of civilized, conventional living. Not, I might say in passing, without a certain humor. Their humor is all through the Chinese nature. Confucius was a profoundly humorous man, but in a very cool way. He didn't have Zhuangzi's belly laugh. But, you see, basic to Confucianism is the idea of what is called Ren. This is romanized Jen, but it's this character in Chinese. And it means human-heartedness. To be a reasonable person. Translated over 70 times into English alone. And then the god let him go. And he disappeared into the mountains. So the idea of, to put it very boldly, the idea of Confucianism is that all details of living should be done in a state of highly controlled consciousness and should be just so exactly right according to the rules. The counter idea of Taoism is that it's better to let everything happen by itself. Trust your impulses, trust your instincts, trust your natural urges. Let go of it all. Now, these two ways of describing Confucianism and Taoism are exaggerated. I am caricaturing them for the sake of contrast. For example, a Taoist is not really a person who believes in pure laissez-faire. What he is trying to say, the principle in Taoism called Wu Wei, which means non-interference, or non-aggression, non-assertion. He's saying, don't act against the grain of things, act with it. Wu Wei is applied in judo. Now, judo is, as you know, a highly effective form of interfering with things. But it does it on the principle of going with the grain. In other words, if in judo, there is a form of judo which is called Juno Kata in the Indian tradition. And its slow motion was not monastic in the way that it is in India or in Burma, Ceylon. Buddhism for the Chinese is to some extent a thing which you go into for a time and you attain enlightenment. And then you can come back, as it were, and do anything you want. You can have family, you can be a tramp, you can just play it any way. But they feel in the whole tone of the Mahayana type of Buddhism, even in India, is that once enlightened, you ought to come back. So the situation of a Buddhist monk in the Far East is, generally speaking, that he's not quite like a monk as we understand monks in the West. Monks in the West take life vows. They vow poverty, chastity, and obedience until they die. But in the Far East, a Buddhist monk may go into the discipline for a number of years and then return to lay life with no bad feelings. In fact, he may be considered a considerable success in having done so. So, that kind of trend in the Confucian and the Taoist attitudes, when it coalesces with Indian Buddhism, produces something very different from anything you'll find in India. And Zen